Welcome to the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit. What do I do now? Documenting, coping, and caring. The first webinar in a series of 5. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the University of Minnesota Extension website. I am Sarah Krymans, a Family Resource Management Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. I would like to introduce you to my colleagues and webinar production team partners, Lori Hendrickson and Becky Hagen-Jokula. The times, they are a-changin', goes the old Bob Dylan song. Our weather has been changing too. Have you noticed? The National Climatic Data Center is the nation's scorekeeper in terms of addressing severe weather and climate events in their historical perspective. This map depicts the number of billion-dollar weather or climate disasters from 1980 to 2011. As you can see, there definitely is no shortage of weather or climate disasters. In 2012, there were 11 weather and climate disaster events with losses exceeding $1 billion each across the United States. These 11 disaster events cumulatively caused over $110 billion in damage and 377 deaths. This made 2012 the second costliest year on record. The 2012 events included 7 severe weather tornado events, 2 tropical storms or hurricane events, and the year-long drought and associated wildfires. To assist professionals to help families with their financial recovery, the University of Minnesota is providing this series of 5 webinars. The dates and topics are listed on the screen. The webinars will focus on what to do now, where to start, helping individuals assess their financial picture, making housing decisions, identifying resources, and creating a new reality. For today's webinar, we will become familiar with the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit, identify key disaster recovery strategies and resources for survivors, learn how to guide survivors to collect accurate recovery information and relevant resources, and examine ways disaster survivors can care for themselves and their children to promote family resilience. But before we get started, there are some resources we'd like to call your attention to. We are going to be pulling in a pod here in just a minute, and we will provide you with a link for a few different things. On the top there, you can click on that link and download a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. Also, there is a PDF for a certificate of participation. We will provide those again at the end. In addition, in the second pod, you will see a link for the webinar evaluation. And because this webinar is provided free by the University of Minnesota, we do ask that you complete the evaluation because that is helpful to us as we improve these resources and produce additional ones. The second item in the bottom pod is for folks who might be accredited financial counselors through the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education, or AFCPE. You can receive CEUs from AFCPE, and so this is the link for the verification form. Finally, the bottom link is for the Family Financial Toolkit. So if you did not have an opportunity to downlink that prior to the webinar, that is the link there. We encourage you, if you have any questions, to be sure to put those in the chat box, or if you have thoughts, comments as we go throughout. Our colleague, Mary Jo Kotras, is helping us monitor the chat box, and we will do our best to respond to those items throughout the webinar. And if we're unable to get to all of the comments, we'll be doing our best to share those responses following the webinar. So to get us started, we would like to get a quick feel for who is on the webinar with us. So we have a poll that we would like to start with. How many years have you been involved in disaster recovery work? So go ahead and pick the best answer for you. 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, or 20 or more years. So it is looking like the majority of folks in the high 50s have been involved in 0 to 5 disasters, with a substantial amount having participated or worked with 6 to 10 disasters. Thank you for that input. We are going to ask another question here. So, as a professional, which disasters have you worked with? And you are able to select more than one answer on this poll. So it'll be helpful to know what kind of experience folks have had. And if you are indicating other, go ahead and put in the chat box as soon as we move the poll what those other disasters are. So it is definitely looking like floods are the most predominant, with tornadoes second, but a lot of experience with a variety of disasters there for sure. All right, thank you for that input. This webinar is going to focus on the resources of the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit. And you'll notice that the graphic on the cover of the toolkit is a puzzle piece, or several puzzle pieces fitting together. And many of us have had the opportunity to put picture puzzles together. Sometimes they're challenging, but you have experience to draw upon as you fit all of the pieces together. After a disaster, survivors will need to think about putting their financial puzzle pieces of their lives back together, much in the same way we might approach solving a picture puzzle. The difference is they most likely have never had to tackle this type of puzzle before. And there are many different types of pieces, maybe pre-existing financial situations, a variety of needs, availability or non-availability of assistance programs, and other options, strategies, and all of that. And typically folks don't really know exactly where to start. But it's important to know how to figure out how to put all of those pieces together. And during this series of 5 webinars, we will help you become familiar with the many puzzle pieces so you are better equipped to help survivors move towards a new reality or a new normal. So we have one final poll here. Please let us know how familiar you are with the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit. Have you seen and used the toolkit extensively? Have you seen it but only used it some? Have you seen it and not used it, or have you never seen it or never used it? Well, this is great. Well, maybe not great, but it's great that you're participating on the webinar today, because it looks like we are reaching an audience that is not familiar with the Disaster Toolkit or the Disaster Recovery Toolkit. You are exactly the audience that we were hoping to reach through the webinar, and we hope that you will glean useful information as we go through today's webinar and the remaining 4. Thank you for sharing. Now, just a little bit about the story of the toolkit. You might wonder how this toolkit came about. Well, as with many places in our country, more disasters were happening here in Minnesota, and Extension has a mission to meet community needs. And before we created something, we needed to understand the community needs through asking those who were impacted. So we asked disaster survivors, what did you experience? What were the issues? What worked? And what would you like others to know to help them? After we obtained the answers to these questions, we then created a research-based material, the toolkit, to meet the educational needs of those we serve. The toolkit was developed based on research conducted with survivors and professionals 2 years after they were impacted by a flood. The survivors at that time had had plenty of time to reflect on their experience and to share with us what worked and what did not work during the recovery process. The toolkit was developed in partnership with the University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University. We share the Red River Valley, which runs north between our borders, and that seems to be causing a lot of flood issues during the springtime. The toolkit was funded by a Smith-Lever Special Needs Act from NIFA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. After the toolkit was developed, it was nationally reviewed and piloted with disaster survivors. So the toolkit was designed to be flexible. It is usable, so survivors can download the whole kit or just the units that they need. It is consumable. It is full of tools or forms that can help as one makes decisions, and the tools can be printed out and worked on with paper and pen, or they are available as a fillable document online that can then be saved to one's personal computer. The toolkit is also customizable. States can customize the toolkit for their specific location or state. Currently, customized versions are available for Minnesota and North Dakota, and I believe Illinois may also be working on a version. If there is a non-state specific version, there is a non-state specific version that is applicable for all states. And states can request a template to customize the toolkit for your state. Primarily it's the last unit, the resources. So please contact us if you would like more information on that. Lastly, the toolkit is accessible. It's available online 24/7, 365. All right, so we're going to pull in quickly a list of the 9 units and how to use the toolkit. Today we are focusing on units 2 and 3, and I'm going to flip to the next slide here. There we go. And this matches up the units of the toolkit with the webinar. So again, you can see today we're focusing on units 2 and 3. And the remaining units we will be talking about later. I also would like to, at this time, just mention that throughout the toolkit, we have a case study, the Younger family, who serves as the resident case study in the toolkit. So Sam and Joe are ages 41 and 38, and they have 3 children ranging in age from 8 to 14. They live in a small rural town in the upper Midwest that was struck by a tornado. And so their situation is used as a learning tool throughout the toolkit. And it might be helpful for survivors to see how this family has used the various tools. But we definitely encourage disaster survivors to make the best decisions for their situation and not just follow the Youngers, as everyone's situation is unique. And now I'd like to pass it on to Lori Hendrickson, who will introduce us to the key strategies and tools for financial recovery.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, this presentation will focus on key strategies for financial recovery. This is covered in units 2 and 3 of the toolkit. And the units introduce key strategies that disaster survivors and the helping agencies that work with them have identified as essential during the recovery process. We'll also look at multiple tools that go hand in hand with these strategies. For many disaster survivors, there's no longer a home, a file cabinet, records, a computer, a phone, much less a calendar to use. Disaster case managers have reported that disaster survivors readily use the tools provided and take the toolkit with them for the long haul. They also keep receipts, copies of assistance applications, and other documents that they use throughout the recovery process. And it becomes their personal recovery office. Disaster recovery requires making many phone calls, attending meetings, doing paperwork, and meeting deadlines that occur. Survivors may think that they will remember all the details to who they talked to and when, but constant changes and stress often cloud normally clear memory. And for this reason, we recommend that survivors document important details of conversations and communications. Survivors may wonder why documentation is so important. And remember, the more detailed and accurate the records, the more they may be reimbursed or able to recoup in losses. Survivors will need documentation when applying for disaster assistance, if they're taking tax deductions for losses, or submitting claims to the insurance company. When documenting a disaster, it's important to answer the following questions. What happened? When did it happen? And what damage was sustained? Besides documenting loss, it's also important to document the actions that will be taken throughout the recovery process. The Document Important Details tool that you see here in Unit 3 will help survivors to start recording all of the details. They will want to include the following information as they use the tool: date, time, action taken or to be taken, and the people involved. Here's a quote from a disaster survivor that highlights the importance of documenting. Survivors may not see the necessity of documenting until they attempt to recall the details of a situation, and by then it might be too late. Stress and time have impacted memory of the situation. And here we see the Younger family. They have completed the documentation example, and you see there are many details that have been included related to the disaster situation, as well as actions that need to be taken. Another strategy for documenting details is by having a to-do list. A to-do list can help survivors record action to be taken, who will do them, the date they need to be done, and the dates they are actually completed. Such lists can keep survivors on track during disaster recovery and are especially useful for meeting deadlines. Some people may have lots of experience in using to-do lists, and if so, they may want to continue using their preferred method in order to document details. Otherwise, the to-do list tool is in Unit 3 and is available for their use. Whatever method is used, remind survivors to keep a completed and dated to-do list in a folder or a large envelope or with a printed copy of this toolkit for safekeeping. A to-do list can help keep the entire family organized around the tasks at hand and help survivors begin to see the progress that they're making. And here is the completed sample of the Younger family's to-do list. You can see the tasks to be completed, who will do these, and when they will be done. And you also see additional comments as reminders. A third tool that can help survivors with documentations is a contact list. A contact list helps keep a record of key people who can help in the recovery process and how to reach them. Keeping a list of contacts in one place will save time and energy. You can remind survivors that for each contact they should include the name of the agency or organization, the name of the contact person, ways to contact that person, including phone, extensions, email address, a website for additional agency information, and any additional important information that they remember about the contact. It's also helpful to keep all business cards collected from disaster recovery professionals in one place. And often people will keep their contact information in a cell phone, and that's a great idea, but it's always a good idea to have a backup written list. And here's our Younger family completed contact list. Again, you see the names, the agency names, phones, email, address, website, who their contact was, and other additional information related to the contact. A fourth tool that can help in documenting important details is the calendar. A calendar can help record application deadlines, meeting dates, times, locations, due dates for key actions. And you'll find several pages of the calendar tool in Unit 3 for use in documenting. The calendar is also a great place to document accomplishments, successes, and celebration. Perhaps when assistance is approved, when volunteers arrive to help with cleanup, or when a family is able to move back into the home. Also, the calendar can be a tool that provides hope and reflection throughout the process to see the progress that has been made. And here's the Younger family's completed calendar for the week. You see it includes the date of the disaster, as well as items that the Youngers have done, and appointments and tasks that they need to complete. Many people use smartphones for a variety of purposes, and survivors may find the Disaster Recovery Log, a free phone app available for Android phones, useful in documenting damage and loss due to a disaster. This app, developed by North Dakota State University Extension Service, and myriad devices helps record information about damages to home and property using images, text, and audio. It uses the smartphone's camera feature to capture photos to illustrate the damage, and users can then key in descriptions of the damaged items or use their smartphone's voice recorder to record an audio description of the damage. These details and photos can be essential for possible insurance or government reimbursement. A link to the app is available on our Toolkit webpage. And we would like to introduce you to Barb. She is a disaster survivor, and she will tell you a little bit about the importance in that documenting played in the disaster that she experienced.
Well, our house was hit by a tornado, and we live in Wadena in June of 2010. And luckily, our house was still standing. There were a lot of people whose houses were completely destroyed. We were very fortunate in that our house was still standing, and we didn't lose paperwork and so on. The things that we did was we kept lists of everything that we had to throw away or destroy. Particularly inside, we just did lists. We wrote it down. I can't remember if we had a spiral notebook or just on pieces of paper. And we just listed everything because eventually you have to figure out the worth of those things that were destroyed. We got one of those plastic boxes with a snap lid, and we just kept everything from the tornado in that box. It was so much easier to have everything in one place. You know, you don't want to just lay it down and I'll come back to it later. Just start from the get-go and use a container or something like that. So anyway, inside we listed everything to eventually find the price of it. When we went outside, we took the camera, and there were some things that we thought, well, maybe the insurance company, won't believe us that we had, grills. Actually, there was a fence that went down, things like that could not, because we wanted to start cleaning up the mess. So we photographed outside things that may be questionable. Another reason to keep very, very thorough records of what you have spent. Even if you just go buy a new trash can, or if you, keep track of everything, because you may have to report these costs on your income tax, because we were surprised when we went to do our taxes for the next year, and they counted, or he said we had to report the insurance payments that we had received. And so you need absolutely everything that you have spent to offset that. You want all of your costs to show. So if you're buying storage buckets or storage bins or cleanup things, put every little receipt in your storage, in your little box that you're saving your costs in.
Okay, thank you, Lori. The next area we will take a look at is the importance of staying in the know. And when a disaster happens, it's so important to know what's going on. And it's important to be aware of the information of all types and at all levels, and to get official and accurate information all around, especially with operations and assistance programs. Local community contacts can be so critical. And also, if one relocates outside of the community, to be aware of having some connect so that they truly have the facts. The Emergency Operations Command Center may be a key in the community in regard to recovery update meetings, briefings by local officials, and media. And we all know whenever a disaster hits, we learn so much, just the visual impacts that are there through the television especially. Attending meetings is essential, and for those that are able to receive general information then and about programs to aid in the recovery process. The meetings can provide information about safe cleanup, handling debris, volunteer availability, money voucher assistance from agencies such as Salvation Army and the American Red Cross. In addition, cleanup and supplies sometimes are provided to citizens. Child care and animal shelter availability, and assistance program deadlines. Very important to receive assistance. And remember, it's very important to be able to ask questions through attending meetings in order to receive information. Websites and media information are also available and can be very helpful. Here's a quote from a disaster survivor, and as you can see, again, reinforcing the staying in the know is so important. So being aware then of those resources and availability of meetings and the importance of communication all around so that that knowledge, resources, and learnings are shared. Communication is a vital key, no doubt. Now we will hear from Trudy, a disaster survivor who participated in a disaster recovery center in Duluth, Minnesota. And so at this point, we'll hear her insight and advice.
For us, the flood event was certainly shocking and unnerving. The fact that we lost our home was an unsettling and sad outcome. But for us, the real psychological and emotional trauma came from the confused and chaotic bureaucratic nightmare that followed the flood. What I learned most from our experience was how vitally important it is for communities to create a reliable information loop in which people impacted by natural disaster can participate. By participation, I mean that impacted people must be able to receive and contribute information to the loop. It is important for responders at all levels of government and service organizations to be in frequent communication with one another to create consistent, reliable, updated, and clear messages. It's equally vital that responders ask for input from those impacted to help shape and improve response and recovery strategies. As recovery from natural disasters can take years, the communication loop must be a long-term commitment.
Okay, thank you. And you can see the importance of asking those questions that are pertinent to one's family and seeking out the answers. Just a note, I also participated in the same disaster recovery center in Duluth, Minnesota during that June flood that we had back in 2012. And I was involved with Extension's effort along with my colleagues to share the toolkit information. And it was an experience I'll never forget in regard to hearing the stories, seeing the stacks of photos that individuals brought in that affected their families. And it was implanted in my brain, all that I learned. Many, many stories. Accepting financial help can assist in the recovery process, and it's so important again to encourage survivors to ask for help and to remember that sometimes it's hard for people to ask for that help, but that programs are paid for many times by tax dollars and contributions, and survivors may have in fact contributed to those assistance programs. So therefore, many times knowing that can help accepting the assistance at hand, and as you can see with that quote. So now is the time to let those programs then help the survivor. And actually at that same recovery center, we did have a survivor that expressed gratefulness for the encouragement of accepting help along with the toolkit use. Another helpful phase would be to engage a case manager. In knowing that disaster recovery can be difficult and complex, case managers can help guide survivors on the recovery process and journey. And awareness that not all communities may have case managers, but they can be of great assistance in helping survivors access money and donations. They are often hired and supervised by nonprofit agencies such as Lutheran Social Services, American Red Cross, United Methodist Committee, and Salvation Army, to list a few. Some are paid and some are volunteers. While having a case manager is not required, it many times sets the stage for accessing money and donations and assistance and information, awareness of what is going on. A case manager can help survivors help themselves, that empowerment, which is very important, and to have access to the most updated information and deadlines. Lists of community and agency contacts can be a link. They can do a nice job with that linkage. And also helping families develop a long-range recovery plan. In addition, they can help find answers for many unmet recovery needs and make appropriate referrals if needed. It's so important to have that advocate, and the case manager often can fill that role. They can also help in the family decision-making process and explaining different terms or what FEMA is, and be that link in helping with decision-making, as was mentioned. When finding a case manager, it's very important to find someone who you trust and you believe in their skills, and it's okay to ask questions when that first encounter, that relationship, you're building a relationship. So knowledge of what agency is represented, asking questions, what can a case manager do for my family, as an example. So it's another resource that can be very helpful and important for many. At this time, we'll hear a few words from a disaster professional in regard to the disaster recovery process from Pastor Paul Kruger.
Volunteer organizations will step up to the plate and do case management to help you as a homeowner or a person who has been affected by disaster to find out what are the options out there, what resources can I find to help me begin to move towards a new normal.
Okay, thank you. And there again, stating the importance of staying in the know and working towards that new normal and being aware of the unknown. So resources, very important, learning, meetings, and communication. Also, assistance can be obtained from long-term recovery committees. And again, to restate that after a disaster, it's a complex, uncertain time. And this teamwork that exists where agency people, nonprofit, join together in a committee that meets can be very powerful to help meet needs, both known and unmet, and maybe perhaps even the unknown. Relationships are formed, and that pitching in that can result in many positive outcomes. A committee can actually help to strengthen area-wide disaster coordination because they share information and they work together many times for that long-term effect. They can raise money and in disaster help seek out in-kind donations that can be of assistance to survivors. Also, it helps agencies to be in the know and to share information, in addition to avoid duplication of benefits. Keeps the story and needs of the community visible by talking regularly to the media, and this exposure can also help lead to increased contributions. So if a survivor has unmet needs, they can actually work through their caseworker and link to a long-term recovery committee. I remember that flood of 2012, hearing about many faith-based organizations, churches that would just spontaneously hold dinners in our area for anyone that needed, just to converse, check, ask questions, receive information, and it was a way that if they didn't have a functional kitchen, they could receive meals to help their families. Examining your financial situation is in a survivor's best interest. And again, because the financial recovery from a disaster can be that complicated and overwhelming life situation, it's advisable to seek help from a trained professional early in the recovery process. And such a counselor may help to look at then your total financial situation, take a look at strategies and options to consider, pros and cons, and also other professionals that you might connect with, such as educators and agents from Extension itself, from bankers, credit unions, mortgage lenders, and also foreclosure prevention counselors, and in the law area, the legal aid that could be of assistance. And we have a short video we'll take a look at.
Never going through a disaster before, this was whole new territory for us and for everyone in the valley to basically figure out what can we afford to do. And the main piece of that is, number one, we had to take a look at what we're bringing in every month between a husband and a wife working full-time and what our expenses were before the disaster. So what we sat down is we figured out maximum what can we afford to do in terms of more loans.
Okay, there again, taking a look at that whole process and questions that come about and considering the financial aspect. Many hands make light work. Remember hearing that saying, and never so true in times of crisis and disaster impacts. So tap those connections. And everyone has connections to people who are close to them, such as family, friends, co-workers, etc. And it just might make life a little more bearable in times of distress. In taking a look also at connections to groups, such as your place of worship, a union, community group, and government agencies, social service institutions, just knowing someone that has a link to some support and assistance can be of help. So it's important to tap all those connections and to make things make sense a little more and collect information. And that saying, many hands then make light work, certainly applies to a disaster recovery. Here's a quote from someone who did use connections from a survivor's viewpoint, and to take a look at that. And again, it's hard for some people to accept that help, but there again, to realize people are out there to help and they want to help. So that awareness is very important. The toolkit also has a tool that can help organize thoughts about who just might be of help for an individual or family. And here you can see the chart in which someone could list what a person could do, take a look at skills and equipment that might be required, to identify the individuals, and a space for additional information. So a way to be organized and to write down information, because during times of stress, we all know it's hard to think of all the options that we might. And here is an example of the younger family who did just that. They identified those that could help, and skills, equipment, types of people, and any other thoughts. So very good tool to have in a file and to have on hand. It may also be helpful to reflect back on the initial to-do list that was mentioned earlier, and to take a look and to make sure one didn't miss any other possible connection. And at this time, we'll do a chat, and there will be a chat pod that will be pulled up. And the goal is to please share strategies or techniques on how to empower survivors to utilize the skills and talents of helpers. And at the very bottom, in the white line, you can type in your thoughts, and they will be shared with everyone. So I'll invite you to please take a moment to share strategies or techniques on how to empower survivors to utilize the skills and talents of helpers. So we welcome your thoughts. Okay, it looks like we have some good ideas here. Any other contributions? Feel free to add. Yeah, very important. And often a tough time, of course, for people. Some great thoughts here in comments. Looks like we still have a couple people typing, so we'll just wait a moment. Okay, very helpful thoughts. Okay, thank you. I believe we'll close the poll in a moment here. Okay, thank you very much. Great ideas have been shared.
Okay, thank you so much, Becky. We also want to just remind you that the toolkit focuses on individual and family financial recovery, but we do know that damage happens everywhere, and so there are a variety of resources that are available for folks if they are a business owner or have an agriculture operation. Resources are cited in the toolkit for those folks, whether they be the Small Business Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Services, Farm Service Agency, and the like. So be sure to check in the resource section of the toolkit for those types of resources. So it is important for disaster survivors to take care of themselves and their families, which isn't always easy given the multiple stressors and challenges that they are facing. Provided in the tools section is the Resilience, Bounce Back, and Adapt journal that survivors can turn to get concrete tips on how to bounce back and adapt during a crisis. This tool was adapted with permission from the Red River Resilience Organization up in the Red River Valley. The journal uses the words facts to remind us to foster hope, act with purpose, connect with others, take care of yourself, and search for meaning. With the help of some survivors, we're going to take a look at each of these.
But you know what? For the first month, most people were numb anyway. They were just numb looking at what they had and what was ahead to clean up. And I think when they found out they were going to get some help, that gave them a whole new renewed hope to go forward.
Fostering hope involves having confidence in oneself. It is important for survivors to remember the problems that they've overcome in before and to draw on those experiences. Survivors need to recognize that they have the ability to learn and to use resilience skills to deal more effectively with stressful circumstances. Survivors can also help others have confidence in themselves by giving positive feedback on their recovery efforts. Putting things in perspective and recognizing that one's current situation will improve is really vital.
Okay. The key thing is be in charge, remain under control. Don't go through the panic mode because there's so many people that panic and they have every right to do so. But take a deep breath and do the best that your heart is telling you to do.
Acting with purpose. We encourage survivors to set goals for their recovery, including simple daily, weekly, and then of course longer-term goals. As professionals, we can help survivors make a plan to meet their goals and implement the plan. To avoid becoming overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation, we encourage survivors to try to focus on the small, achievable steps they can take in order to move in the right direction.
You might have felt alone when you were home, cleaning and mucking out your own house, but when you went up, you felt this tremendous sense that you weren't alone.
And in this case, Montini Hall, where folks went up, was the community dining site that folks went up for meals for quite a while. So when we talk about connecting with others, we encourage disaster survivors to maintain relationships as they really help to buffer against stress. Survivors may find it helpful to both give and receive help. We encourage survivors to accept help that is offered to them and to do what they can to help others and serve their community.
I sometimes wonder if we fully recovered the mental impact. You know, it's been real dramatic, and the businesses that you're involved in, the school you're involved in, they're just, you know, our church was flooded and my dad's house had water in it, so it was I don't know, you know, when you look back, maybe the mental health issues are as important as financial, but the financial heals you mentally too.
We encourage survivors to take care of their body and physical health, and when their body is working right, they will feel better and are better able to face those difficult challenges. Even though it is difficult, it's important for survivors to take time to relax as well, even if it just means a cup of coffee in the morning. During disaster recovery, survivors may feel guilty about relaxing, but taking time to relax is essential during this difficult time. One's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being will have a direct impact on a survivor's financial well-being. A disaster forces survivors to make rapid changes in their lives and definitely disrupts normal routines.
As tough as it is, stay positive. You have to. And try to look for the good things. Keep your eyes and ears open. You've got to look. There's always a silver lining. And friends and family, you can't live without them. The friends that you meet along the way, it's like the impact they've had in your life. They've had such an impact, we'll never forget it.
Searching for meaning in a disaster might not be high on a survivor's list as they begin their journey to recovery. However, working through personal crisis can have some positives, and thinking about them may provide meaning to the survivor's experiences. We encourage survivors to learn about themselves. Have they learned any new skills and coping behaviors during the disaster recovery process? We encourage survivors to watch for and identify personal growth, changes in themselves and in their lives, such as renewed appreciation for life, closer relationships, new friends, maybe a deeper spirituality, or meaning and growth of inner strength. Most adults have some experience with crisis and loss. However, children experiencing a natural disaster may not have the tools they need to recover. The toolkit features several tips from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration's National Mental Health Information Center to help children cope. The tips include tips for parents, families, and adults in the child's life and helping professionals. And some of them are to listen to children, to provide opportunities for children to express feelings, and the importance of routines during the recovery process. We will now hear from Chaplain Mark Ellenson, who has extensive experience working with families recovering from disasters.
Well, by definition, resilience is the ability to bounce back and adapt. So therefore, by definition, it's a flexibility. I have a little ball here. The ability to be pushed in, but to come back. And that's the flexibility. And families can do that. A family may have lost their home, their house, but somehow they can be flexible. They can help their children to see that we've lost our house, but we still have a home because we are together, because we still have these vital relationships. We still have the values and the things that are important. And we still can look forward to say, the house can be rebuilt, things can happen, things are going to change, but we can have that flexibility. And sometimes for moms and dads, it's really hard to have that flexibility. We're so worried about our kids, but that ability to tell them, no, we're still here, we're still together, we're still connected, that's important. That keeps our kids going. And the truth is, what's good for our kids is good for us. That's what keeps us going. Families also can show connection. It's one of the basic things about resilience, to be connected with other people. And when bad things happen, we have a tendency to retreat, hide behind something. And we need to be connected. And so sometimes in a family, it'd be pretty easy maybe to think, well, I don't want the kids to know, so let's not tell them all bad things are. Well, kids know. And there needs to be that kind of open connection, not necessarily sharing everything, but for the kids to know and everyone to know, hey, we're being open, we're being supportive, we're not keeping secrets, we're facing these things together. And when we speak them, when we say, yeah, there was quite a disaster, it destroyed the house, our church is gone, the school has been hurt, that when we say that, it minimizes it right there. It's out there, it's said. So keep that connection, keep an openness. And one of the big things I think in families, it's the big thing in resilience all time, is take care of ourselves. I know moms and dads or whoever thinks they're in charge, we want to think, I got to take care of the kids, so I got to just push and push and push. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be taking care of our kids or anybody else either. We've got to take care of ourselves. And those are so fundamental things. You got to go get some sleep. We all think we can do without it. We cannot. We got to eat well. We've got to do something other than work all the time. We have to find something to relax and get our mind on something else. We have to take care of ourselves, and then we can take care of those around us, and then they can take care of us too. Maybe one last thing I would say that would be to give resilience is that somehow we deal with our problems the best when we feel that we're helping solve someone else's. Is there someone nearby that you can give a little encouragement to? Maybe as a family, have them over, or you do something for them. Whenever we feel we are serving others, being part of the solution, there's something about that that just sort of gets us strengthened up. It sort of fills us up inside. And I know children, they like to think they're solving something. They like to think they're making a difference. And we can. So look for those small little ways to do that. The family, it's vulnerable in disaster, but it's also probably our greatest asset.
Thank you to Mark. He's done such a great job working with us. And thank you, Karen. You indicated in the chat box as well that it is so good for folks to do something daily for themselves and their family. And Wendy has shared in the chat box a link to a resource that Montana has developed on helping children cope after a natural disaster. So thank you for sharing those, and we hope people will check those out. On the next slide here, we are going to hear from Barb, another survivor. Her family survived a tornado, and she will share how their family was able to keep hope during the disaster recovery process.
Well, you know you have to go on. You know you have to do something. People were wonderful in that. There were volunteers from out of town. There were volunteers from family that came and helped. And you weren't doing all of this alone. You just needed to go on, and as you went on, you find out if you clean up this little area, well, that's better, that's done. You know, you just feel like you're accomplishing something. And you have to work with your professionals, your insurance agent or whatever. But you have to do the work yourself, and you have to go ahead and just pick up one thing. You just start, and it doesn't matter where you start, but you start somewhere, and you just go ahead and do it. And it comes along, and it takes a long time. I would say it took us about 2 years before we felt like we were, you know, kind of finished and not thinking, oh, we have to fix this after the tornado or fix that after the tornado. And that included our outside work. We had to redo our lawn and replant some trees and so on. But it takes a long time, but you just have to do it. And you also have to, and I think we talked about this earlier, try and do something other than deal with the tornado. Sometimes you have to step aside. I mean, you can't do it early on. Right away, you just have to do what you have to do. But after, maybe even it's a couple months, you have to take some time to let your brain rest on something else, whether it's a hobby or something. It's very soothing to do something like that.
Lori will now take us through to the conclusion of the webinar. Lori, it's to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, our philosophy and extension is to provide tools for people to make their own best decisions. And you will see that we have correctly named this publication because it is full of worksheets and tools to help families consider many perspectives of their situation and then in turn make their own best decisions. As you can see by the comments of those who have used it, this philosophy works for people to be and to feel empowered. And they're stressed to make many important decisions, so that empowerment is so important. Remember that our toolkit was designed to be flexible. It's usable. Survivors can download the entire toolkit or just the units that they feel that they need. It's consumable. The toolkit is full of tools or forms that can help as everyone makes their own decisions. It's customizable. And if you'd like to customize with your own information, please contact us and we can help you access the template to do that. The toolkit is also accessible. It's available online 24/7, 365 days a year, and the toolkit URL is printed on your screen. And we've also got that in a share pod we'll share in a minute here. In the 2007 flood disaster in southeastern Minnesota, disaster recovery resource fairs were piloted in the affected communities. And these were successful in reducing barriers and improving access to available assistance programs. In this toolkit, you will find a guide to replicating the community-based approach to reducing barriers and improving access to disaster assistance programs. A disaster recovery resource fair is a local one-stop shop for disaster survivors to access multiple assistance programs at one location. They're held at times when survivors may be available to attend and are offered often on more than one occasion. More people participate when the resource fair is held in a familiar place within the community, and it is organized and promoted and staffed by people who are also familiar to them. A disaster recovery resource fair might resemble a community health fair or a trade show or a home and garden expo, where individuals can simply interact with a variety of resources in one setting. And this how-to guide is also available on our University of Minnesota Extension website. Now we do have one additional chat, and we would like to pull that in for you right now. And we will ask you, again in the line at the bottom, the white area at the bottom, please share any additional resources or key strategies that you have found effective when you're working with disaster survivors. And if you'd please type in the area, the little white area, and share those. I see people are typing already. And I was contacted by someone in the webinar that they had a Word document of the strategies that we were talking about earlier, and I will share those back to you in an email, and I can try to do that with these as well. Okay, ready.gov, the FEMA website, is one that is listed here. Community meetings and updates. Yeah, the communication piece, as we talked earlier and had a survivor talking about that. Yes, very important. A couple other people are still typing. In Virginia, let's see, Amanda from Virginia says disaster case management. Let people record their stories on audio or video. I think the people that we've been working with and doing some of this have found that that's helpful, that they know they're sharing their stories to help others. Listen to people impacted by disaster to learn from them what they need. Create flexible response strategies. Great. Mental Health Consumer Survivor Network of Minnesota. Excellent. We've got a link there too. Okay, I see one other person typing. We'll get that in. Working with Salvation Army. Offering food for the body allows people to share things that they need. Yes, I think that community time and that sharing and knowing it's okay to ask for help is a very cathartic kind of thing. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up this pod, the share pod now. We've got a couple more people typing. We'll get those in quick. We do want to try to finish as close to time as possible. Lists of job opportunities. Yeah, people often need work. Maybe their jobs were lost in the process. All right, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close that pod. So just to review what we've talked about today. Today we have provided information to assist you in becoming familiar with the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit. We've also looked at identifying key disaster recovery strategies and resources for survivors, including documenting important details, utilizing that to-do list, contact list, and calendar, and guiding survivors to collect accurate recovery information and relevant resources. Also examining ways that disaster survivors can care for themselves and their children in order to promote family resilience. We did want to also provide you an opportunity to remind you to attend our future webinars as well, and we hope you've already registered for those. And we will put up the information again for our file shares. To get a hold of these items, simply click on them and ask to save to computer, and you'll get those. Those should also help you in doing that with the evaluation and the AFCP CEU form and our toolkit link. I can also post that evaluation link in the chat area so that you will see it there as well in case you don't get to it immediately. So we will get that posted as well. Seeing that we are a bit over time right now, we'll go ahead and move on and just thank you for participating in today's webinar. And again, we hope to see you in our future webinars. We'll leave the information up here for a little bit so that you can go ahead and make those downloads. And again, we appreciate you being with us today, and have a great day.
So we have one final poll here. Please let us know how familiar you are with the Recovery After Disaster, the Family Financial Toolkit. Have you seen and used the toolkit extensively? Have you seen it but only used it some? Have you seen it and not used it, or have you never seen it or never used it? Well, this is great. Well, maybe not great, but it's great that you're participating on the webinar today, because it looks like we are reaching an audience that is not familiar with the disaster toolkit or the disaster recovery toolkit. You are exactly the audience that we were hoping to reach through the webinar, and we hope that you will glean useful information as we go through today's webinar and the remaining 4. Thank you for sharing. You can receive CEUs from AFCPE, and so this is the link for the verification form. Finally, the bottom link is for the Family Financial Toolkit. So if you did not have an opportunity to downlink that prior to the webinar, that is the link there. We encourage you, if you have any questions, to be sure to put those in the chat box, or if you have thoughts, comments as we go throughout. Our colleague, Mary Jo Katras, is helping us monitor the chat box, and we will do our best to respond to those items throughout the webinar. And if we're unable to get to all of the comments, we'll be doing our best to share those responses following the webinar. So to get us started, we would like to get a quick feel for who is on the webinar with us. So we have a poll that we would like to start with. How many years have you been involved in disaster recovery work? So go ahead and pick the best answer for you. 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, or 20 or more years. So it is looking like the majority of folks in the high 50s have been involved in 0 to 5 disasters, with a substantial amount having participated or worked with 6 to 10 disasters. Thank you for that input. We are going to ask another question here. So, as a professional, which disasters have you worked with? And you are able to select more than one answer on this poll. So it'll be helpful to know what kind of experience folks have had. And if you are indicating other, go ahead and put in the chat box as soon as we move the poll what those other disasters are. So it is definitely looking like floods are the most predominant, with tornadoes second, but a lot of experience with a variety of disasters there for sure. All right, thank you for that input. This webinar is going to focus on the